One more. Cheetos.
Nate's wanting to eat Cheetos.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
It hasn't just been you and me for a while.
Can you hurry and finish those, please?
Take a deep breath. It's going to be okay.
Hi, everyone. We're happy you're here.
This is the first time it's just been you and me for a while.
Really?
Well, you were gone 2, 3, and 4 weeks ago, and then last week we had Tina Shermer Sellers.
That's true.
What did you think about last week?
I thought it was great. Tina's phenomenal.
I really enjoyed having a guest.
Yeah, and I think we got a lot of good feedback from last week. A lot of people really appreciated the conversation.
Important topic. Sexual
Very
shame.
important topic.
What was the highlight of your week this week?
We started finally getting the nursery together.
Yeah, baby's bedroom.
Yeah. It's fun to see it start coming together.
Yeah.
Got a chair yesterday.
The comfiest chair ever.
So comfy.
So comfy, you guys.
Very comfy.
So comfy.
What was your favorite part of your week?
I made a really good breakfast sandwich this week.
That's a great thing.
It was scrambled eggs and bacon and cheddar cheese and sliced up avocado and then I grilled the bread.
Yummy.
Actually, was it cheddar cheese or American cheese? Either way, it was really good.
Lately, when I've been at work, he's been sending me pictures of his sandwiches that he's been making himself.
Well, and the sandwiches are just like...
They look gourmet.
But I'm just taking...
leftovers from our fridge and
I'm like the junk disposal. Like I look in the fridge and I'm like, all right, what do we have left over? And how can I make a meal out of this?
And it's always a sandwich.
Or a hot dog.
Or a hot dog sandwich.
I've eaten a lot of hot dogs lately.
Anyways, we hope you guys had a good week.
If you had a great week this week or something great happened to you, we'd love to hear about it in the comments.
Yeah, let us know what the favorite part of your week was in the comments.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we talking about today?
We're talking about the gateway to intimacy and connection.
I'm really excited about this topic. When we were preparing it, this guy, if you haven't picked up this book by now, please do.
It's so good.
The way that he talks about things, it's when it says the new rules of marriage, they really are new concepts that you don't really hear in your typical marriage courses. It's just some really practical and useful information. And today
we're talking about chapter. What chapter?
It is chapter.
We're talking about this in a way that we've never talked about it before. What's it called? Get yourself together.
Get yourself together.
So this is going to be
healthy self-esteem and boundaries.
Yeah. So I know we've talked about boundaries in the past, and we're going to talk about boundaries today as it relates to self-esteem and why it's important, what's necessary in order to have a really healthy, happy, amazing relationship.
So the way that Terry Real sets this up is by using the relationship grid.
The boundary conversation is going to be the short part of the conversation, by the way, and then we'll expand into the rest.
Let's throw the grid up so they can see what we're talking about.
You want to see the grid?
I want to see the grid. So this is the grid that we're talking about.
I made that.
You did make it. It looks really pretty. I like the way it looks.
So the boundaries section of the relationship grid
runs along the horizontal axis.
Yes. I like the way that we did that together.
Vertical axis is the self-esteem part of it. So we're going to talk about boundaries, self-esteem, and how it all comes together and how you need to be in the center of this grid in order to have relationship health. In order to have a healthy relationship.
We're aiming for this area right here in the middle.
Well, and honestly, not just a healthy relationship, but just a mental and emotional help for yourself.
Yeah, a healthy sense of self. So let's start with just the grid itself, and let's talk about just the x-axis.
Right. So now we're going to talk about boundaries. So we can throw this grid off for just 1 second while we talk about boundaries.
If you guys have questions or comments or insights along the way, we'd love to see them in the chat.
Yes. So the first part of this grid is the boundaries. And we talked about this before, but we're going to talk about it a little bit differently today. So the two types of boundaries, I can't really see our notes.
You told me to take it down. Oh.
No, that's what I mean. Thank you. So boundaries, you have your physical boundaries, which it's kind of like your skin. A physical boundary is a skin. Skin keeps things out, but it also lets things in. Like it makes sure that all the harmful substances don't get into your body, and it protects all your internal organs, but it lets in necessary nutrients like vitamin D from the sun, or things like moisturizers that you put on your body, or, things like that. Those are physical boundaries.
Another great physical boundary, a fence.
A fence
We've used
is
that
a great
example in
physical
the
boundary.
past.
Yes.
So what's a psychological boundary?
Psychological boundary is essentially the same as a physical boundary in that you're working to keep things in that you want to keep in, and then keep things out that you want to keep out. So you've got it's like an orange with an orange peel.
Tell me about that.
So you've got your containment part of this boundary, which is this peel is keeping the juices of your orange inside of it. It's protecting the actual fruit itself.
The delicious flavors
from getting out. So you don't want your juice leaking all over everything. Right. So that's the containment aspect of it. And then you have
a protection
aspect of it, which the rind is protecting the fruit. So containment and protection. That's the two parts of your psychological boundary that you need to be cultivating.
Right. So if you think about a metaphorical orange peel around your spirit or your mind or your emotions, and the goal of that orange peel is to protect you from things that might be a threat, from maybe other people's criticisms or their bad attitude or unkind things that they might say. But also at the same time, you are protecting other people from big emotions that you might be having. So your anger, your frustration, your unkind words, the thoughts that go through your head that you're like, if I say this, it's probably not going to end well.
Mm-hmm.
So the goal is to shield other people from that, to contain the negative stuff so that you're not just lashing out and being a little reckless and irresponsible with your emotions. But at the same time, protect yourself from other people's irresponsible behaviors and emotions.
So the important thing about these boundaries is that you're not too far on one end of one side of the spectrum.
Right. So let's bring that document up again.
Right.
So if you go too far to one extreme, the protecting extreme, you become walled off.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
Do you want to talk about what that looks like?
Yeah. So being walled off means you're protected. You've protected yourself. You're inside this fortress, but you're not able to connect with anybody. So you're protected, but you're not connected.
It's like so protected that you've cut off contact and any ability to connect with others.
Right.
Right.
You're not letting anything in.
So that's not a boundary.
Or anything out.
A wall that like this is not a boundary because you're not letting anything in. You're only keeping things out.
Right. A boundary is, Terry Real uses the word supple.
Yeah.
It lets things in and it lets things out. And when you're boundaryless, you're connected with people, but you're not protected in any way.
Right.
So it's finding this balance of being
connected and protected at the same time. Not just protected or just connected.
Right. Because neither one of these two spectrums are going to create intimacy for you in your relationship.
No.
Or vulnerability or anything like that.
Because on the one side, if you're overly protected and you're walled off, it's this side, it looks like, whatever. Everything's flip-flopped on the camera. If you're completely walled off and you've isolated yourself, it's unable to connect with you. Of course you can't have intimacy because you can't connect. You can't share emotions. You can't talk about how your day was. You can't build a friendship. All the things that we've talked about in our previous weeks, it's unable to build all those things that create the foundation of a really strong, thriving relationship. But on the other side, if you have all connection and no protection, then you're emotionally volatile, you're unstable, you're erratic, you are your partner feels like they're walking on eggshells because you're just kind of like a ticking emotional time bomb. Mm-hmm. And so the goal is to find our way towards the middle where we're both protected and connected.
Right.
Okay. Does that summarize our boundaries stuff?
Yes. And I like Terry Real has a quote in here that brings it all together. He says, "I want you to respect walls. They're there for a reason. Partners who live behind walls are just boundaryless people who've learned to protect themselves crudely. Take down their walls and you get unshielded boundarylessness, which is precisely why they won't let you do it. People who live behind walls don't need talk of more openness. They need reassurance that they will still be able to protect themselves as they get healthy, but in more nuanced ways. Both boundarylessness and walls block real connection, and the solution to both of these seemingly opposite conditions is the same: cultivating the supple protection of a functioning boundary. There's that word again.
Supple.
The supple protection of a
It reminds me
boundary.
of the show Recess.
I watched Recess, but I don't know.
Tender, supple. They used to say that.
Okay.
Good show.
All right. So that's the boundary part of this grid. And now we're going to talk about the self-esteem part of this grid, which
and this is something that we don't this is something that we don't talk about often inside of the marriage space, is the importance of self-esteem. In order to have the strongest marriage possible, it requires two people to show up and be whole, complete people. And we've talked about the importance of standing on your own 2 feet. We've talked about the importance of differentiation. Like we've talked about this type of stuff over the last 12 weeks of learning to really like own yourself and not try and manage your partner. And part of this is developing a healthy self-esteem. And so we're going to talk about the 2 ways that people get out of sync with their self-esteem, and a couple of ways that we oftentimes look for self-esteem that are counterfeits. So should we start off with the counterfeits and then talk about the grandiosity and shame?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to get back to this.
Self-esteem in itself is essentially knowing your worth as a human being. And that really, it's not earned, it's not conditional. You can't add to your worth. You can't subtract to your worth. You just have this inherent worth simply because you're alive.
Yes.
That is self-esteem.
It's true in the gospel.
You're worthy. Right.
It's like a true gospel teaching.
Right. We talk about how God isn't a respecter of persons, and he doesn't love one person more than he loves another person.
Here's a great analogy I like to share, and hopefully this resonates with you. But in the business world, how do you determine the worth of something? The worth is not determined by the person who sells it. The worth is determined by the person who buys it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So like a tissue might be worth a penny, but if Justin Bieber sneezes on the tissue and then puts it on eBay, somebody might pay $1,000 for that.
Right.
So on the value goes up, not because the tissue is worth more, not because, how do I put it? The value goes up because somebody's willing to pay the price for it, pay a higher price for it. And you might have like an heirloom at your house that you cherish above all other things. Maybe it was your great grandma's thing or your grandma's thing. And it's like that she passed down to you and it means a lot to you, and you wouldn't sell it for the world. But if it were to go like show up at a garage sale, someone might pay like $5 for it.
Right.
It's not that valuable, but the value would be very high to you. And so the value is set by the person who pays the price. And I want you to think about who paid the price for you. Christ paid the price. And what did he pay? Infinitely.
Infinitely. Yeah.
He paid everything.
For every single person.
Right. And so we all have the same value, and that value is infinite. Mm-hmm. And you don't get to choose what your value is. Christ already chose because he already paid for you. Do you like that?
I really do like that. And it's like it says in this definition that Terry talks about, you can't add worth to it and you can't subtract worth from it no matter what you do. And the problem with these counterfeit self-esteems is that is when you're trying to add to your own worth and you really can't. So there's 3 types of counterfeit self-esteem.
Yeah.
The one is performance-based.
Do you want me to type these up for you?
Sure.
Put them at the bottom of the screen.
So performance-based is the one that I struggle with the most. And that is that your worth is determined by what you do. So if I got straight A's in high school, I knew that that to me was more worthy than if I didn't get straight A's, or getting into nursing school, doing all these things. I felt like I had to do all these things to be worthy. And it even crossed over into my relationship with God, and that I felt like my ability to be loved by God was based on what I did. So that's performance-based, is you try and do things that make you feel like you're like you're worth more. And that's counterfeit. The next one is, will you click? There you go. The next one is other-based. And this one's also, I think, really common in our culture.
Yeah. This is what other people think about you.
This is, I am worthy because you think I'm worthy.
In his book, he says women typically struggle with this more. And the performance-based one is what men struggle with more on average. It doesn't mean it's universal. It's just on average. And
I think it's common to struggle with all three of them.
Oh, for sure. They're all struggles. It's just these are the ones that are most common to different.
Have you ever heard a woman say that, like, when she gets dressed up for a date, it's not really for her date, but it's for the other women in the room?
Oh yeah, I've heard that.
Like, that's other base worth.
Having the approval of others.
Having the approval of others.
I'm
worthy based on what this person thinks about me.
And this is the type of esteem that drove me away from the church in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Is I left because I felt a lot of shame. And I felt shame because I was nervous that, like, my bishop or my parents or my friends or a future potential mate would think that I was a terrible person because of my past sins or my struggles or my imperfections. And there were times where I just felt completely empty and unlovable. I had no self-esteem because I was basing my self-esteem on being afraid of what other people would think of me if they really knew me for who I was. Mm-hmm. I think that's very common. I think it's common for people to feel sad if their partner gets upset with them, or like, or like they rely on their parents or their friends or their husband or their wife for a sense of validation, for a sense of purpose. I know a lot of people rely on their kid, like a lot of moms especially rely on their kids for a sense of purpose. And when the kids move out, I know a lot of people go through a really tough transition and they're like, oh my gosh, I don't have this small human depending on me all the time and telling me that they need me and that they love me and that they want me. And now I don't have any purpose. And their esteem was built around a role and not necessarily who they were. It wasn't self-esteem, it was other esteem.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's another, I think, again, it's really prevalent in our culture because let's say when we go to get interviewed by the bishop or a member of the bishopric for a temporal recommend, it's called a worthiness interview. And I don't know if that's really a technical term or if that's really what it should be called.
They've changed it now, but yeah,
but it's just like, here, let me go into an office and this person is going to determine my worthiness. And I think that we get that mixed up with your worth. So this is something that is a huge issue in our culture just 100%. Because of that, I think, misinterpretation of the word worthiness. We also determine our worth based on our quote unquote worthiness.
Right. And then the third part of self-esteem,
attribute-based esteem.
It's attribute
this
self-esteem.
Is the keeping up with the Joneses.
Your possessions, your accomplishments, your
the trophy
accolades,
wife, the big
having a big
corporate
house,
job, the big muscles, the perfect body,
other attribute-based ways of having self-esteem could be in the church, could be like your calling.
That's a huge one.
It could be
that's a big
the type of underwear you're wearing.
Right.
Like I'm wearing garments, and so there's a sense of me, I feel closer to God, and I might use that as a way to judge others. Mm-hmm. It could be the number of kids you have. It could be anything on the outside that contributes to your outside appearance that
bless you.
Woo! Anything that you might have on your outside appearance that might contribute to you feeling more safe and secure and comfortable with yourself. Could be the type of car you drive. It could be a lot of things.
Right. And that's attribute-based esteem. So we've got performance based esteem, and then relying on others,
other-based,
to tell you your worth, and then your attributes. Yeah. Who can relate to these? I know that I've been through just all three of them with determining your self-worth.
Yeah.
And
so the goal here is to build your self-esteem not through performance, others, or your achievements and the attributes that you have, but to find it within yourself.
Right.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about how you find that in yourself now, because intimacy falls at the intersection of self-esteem and boundaries.
We're going to bring it all together now.
So if you don't have boundaries and you don't have self-esteem, you cannot have true intimacy.
The cool thing about this is you don't need to be in a relationship to work on this.
Yes.
And this is another one of those things where you don't need your partner to be on board with you to work on. So
all of them.
Yes, all of them. We all
relate.
do that.
When we're going over this chapter, we're like, oh, that's us. Here's an example. Oh, that's us. Here's an example.
Right. Yep. So this is work that you can do individually.
Yeah.
And the closer you are to the center of this grid, the more healthy you're going to be and the more capable you will be of having a really great relationship. And it's a self-awareness thing, because unless you're aware of this grid, you don't really know that this is going on.
Yeah.
So this is really good work that you can do outside of your relationship as well as inside of your relationship. So let's talk about the grid and the different areas you can find yourself in.
Great.
So we've got these 4 quadrants, and you've got on the
1, 2, 3.
Un, deux, trois. I don't know what 4 is.
You didn't know what 2 was either. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Whatever.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes,
You know that
I can
one.
speak Spanish better.
You are a Spanish speaker.
I'm Spanish speaking. Okay. So top right-hand corner, I'm not going to point because it's going to be opposite.
Well, no, let's talk about the top and bottom first. We haven't talked about that yet.
Oh, you're right.
Of self-esteem.
We haven't yet.
Okay, so of
This
self-esteem,
is important.
we're avoiding this 3 self-esteem counterfeits. Now we want to talk about how when you do have self-esteem, just like boundaries, they can be taken to an extreme and they can cut out your connection. When you work on your own, getting your esteem from yourself, there's a temptation to also go to an extreme, high or low.
So low self-esteem on the one end,
which is a one down position, which is based in shame.
That's just essentially bringing your worth below others. Like your worth is a 1 step below.
Thinking yourself as less than.
Thinking of yourself as less than. And then grandiosity is putting yourself in a 1-up position where you think that you are better than other people. And again, we all fall on this spectrum, and it's going to be different based on where we're at in life.
Should we do this quote?
But
or do you want to talk more about?
I want to talk more about the individual stuff first. So shame, we've talked about this a lot.
Last week's whole episode was about shame.
Shame is the I am bad. I am a horrible person.
I'm not worthy of love.
I'm not worthy of love.
I'm a disappointment.
Right. Shame, I think, it's easier to recognize when you yourself are feeling shameful because it doesn't feel good.
It feels gross.
It feels gross. It feels you're more likely to want to do something about it if you're feeling ashamed, because it's just not a place that you want to stay in. This is why grandiosity is the more dangerous of the 2.
Yes. Let's talk about that.
And okay, so grandiosity is a 1-up position. You feel superior, 1-up, godlike, worth more than another person or a group of people. It feels good.
Do you know what it reminds me of?
What?
The Rameumptum.
The Rameumptum.
From the scriptures, from Book of Mormon. Lord, we thank you this day for making us better than everybody else. For making us thy chosen people. For blessing us above and beyond which we are deserving, because we are chosen. We are your true children.
That is grandiosity at its finest. So grandiosity impairs your judgment. It makes you oblivious. It really does. It makes you oblivious to the fact that you are putting yourself in a 1-up position. And it involves, Terry Real says, blunted sensitivity to the effects of your behavior on others and your and the potential of negative consequences for your actions.
Yeah.
So if you are telling yourself, oh, I'm not in the grandiosity, then you are in the grandiosity.
Yeah. A great sign that you are
grandiosity,
1-upping yourself, that you are in a grandiose mindset, is that you think, yeah, this doesn't apply to me.
I've never been there. Yeah, we've all been there. And again, we have to be really careful of this as members of the church, because we've been told a lot of times our whole lives, you're a chosen generation and all these things, like you're God's chosen people. And we have to be extra careful, because it's really easy to hear and to put yourself in a 1-up position and look down on other people and think that you're better than other people.
Yeah. And we'll talk a lot more about what that actually looks like as we go on.
Right.
So here we have the two extremes then. You've got walled off, you've got boundaryless, and then you've got yourself as in a one-up position or better than everybody else, better than your partner.
Right.
Or shame, which is like, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm a failure.
We've talked about contempt before and what it looks like. Contempt is kind of the belittling and the name calling.
Yep.
And
it's one of the 4 horsemen. We talked about this in week 3, I think, or week 4.
Right. And so on this vertical spectrum, Terry Real says, when the beam of contempt swings inward.
Did I put this quote on here? Yeah.
This is a fabulous quote. When the beam of contempt swings inward, we call that shame. When the beam points out towards those around you, we call that grandiosity.
So somebody like me, who's the horseman that I deal the most with, just to remind you what the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are, that destroy marriage faster than anything else. It's criticism, defensive,ness, stonewalling, and contempt.
Mm-hmm.
And contempt, Dr. Gottman calls it the sulfuric acid of love. It's the thing that will destroy your relationship the fastest. I struggle with contempt. That's like my number 1 horseman. And the contempt the way I directed my contempt for like the first 30 years of my life was inward. I judged myself. I hated myself. I thought I was less than. I thought I was unworthy. And now the temptation that I have as I deal with that contempt is that the pendulum has swung to the other side. And it's really easy for me to fall into a holier than thou. I'm better than you. I know more than you. I know what's best. You don't. You're stupid.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get it. And I have to like really be conscious of this. Now I want to point out that, where do we get to? Right here. So the center, the healthy place where intimacy thrives, this little circle in the center, it's not smack in the middle, it's just a zone.
Mm-hmm.
And so you do need to have like a certain sense of, I don't want to say like shame, but guilt. Like you need to be aware enough of yourself to know that like to understand the consequences that your behavior has on others.
Right.
That's a healthy sense of shame.
Right.
Like knowing that if I show up and I am belligerent or mean or cruel or really loud and obnoxious, that it's going to make other people uncomfortable. And then that keeps me from acting out in a negative way. Like that's healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And then
it's when you get to the whole, this is just how I am, and you take it or leave it.
Right.
Like, I'm worthy just
side,
as I am, and I don't need to change for anybody.
And on the shame side, taking it to the extreme of like always being the victim, always being the one who's being walked all over, feeling completely helpless and powerless. So I want to reemphasize again, this intersection of boundaries and self-esteem is the intersection of intimacy and closeness. Mm-hmm. And this is something that a lot of couples never get to experience,
right?
Because they don't understand the concepts of boundaries or self-esteem. So they don't even know where the quadrant is, like where they need to land in order to be healthy. And it can be they can manage together and live a relatively okay lifestyle. But if you really want a truly excellent, deeply meaningful, deeply connected life, it starts with really understanding this intersection and doing the work to get towards the center.
Right.
Yeah.
And Terry Real calls this becoming truly human. And I really want to pull up his quote because I think this is a fabulous quote. It's the one that says, you can't love yourself or anyone else. This one. Okay. He says this, and he entitles this Becoming Truly Human.
Yeah.
And he says, you cannot love yourself or anyone else from a one up or one down position. Come into the healthy position of same as, neither above nor below. Become a human among other humans, eyeball to eyeball. And this is my favorite part. Just as frail as the next person and just as magnificent. I love that. Just as frail as the next person and just as magnificent. It's true that people get by without learning this, a great many people, and their lives are often experienced as plenty good enough. But I don't want good enough to be sufficient for you. I want you to want more. I want you to insist on real intimacy and real health. They are your birthright and the only path to true satisfaction.
I want more. I'm surprised. It surprises me how many people in our church, and I'm going to be critical here a little bit. It surprises me how many people in our church believe in the concept of a celestial marriage and being perfected, just like Christ is perfect, but they are willing to settle for a good enough marriage and a good enough life. Drives me bonkers. Mm-hmm. Like people who profess to believe an idea, but their behavior doesn't mirror that idea or doesn't strive towards the ideal that they believe in.
And this is something that has been our goal all along with this podcast, with these classes, with Nate's work, is helping people to not settle for just good enough. We really want people to be able to know what is possible and then the tools that they can use to get to what's possible.
Yeah.
And I love that he says, I'm going to say it again, when you get to that place where you recognize that you're just as frail as the next person and also just as magnificent. I think that is so powerful.
That's true humility.
When you recognize your own capacity for failure, your own capacity for faults, and your own capacities for flaws, while at the same time recognizing your potential, recognizing how your infinite value that you have, and then putting everybody on that same plane. It is powerful, especially when you do this in your marriage and when you do this in your relationship.
Totally.
So that's what we want to help you with today, is getting into the center of this grid. And to do that, we need to talk about what it's like to be in the other 4 quadrants.
Right.
There are people who live in a quadrant. That's just the way they are. They live in a specific quadrant. But for the majority of people, you're going to step into every single quadrant.
We're going to float around in different areas, always trying to move back towards the center is the goal.
So we're going to talk about what it looks like to be in those quadrants and then what to do when you recognize that you're in a quadrant.
If you can relate to being in one of those quadrants, I would love it if you would just let us know in the comments, because we're going to share some personal examples and some general examples of what it might look like to be in one of these quadrants. And we're hoping that it'll set off a light bulb and make you go, oh my gosh, I might need to bring my grandiosity down, or maybe stop being so ashamed and step into my confidence, or stop being so walled off, or stop
maybe
being
I need to open up myself a little bit more, or maybe I need to protect my emotions a little bit more. So the first one we're going to talk about is the bottom,
walled off and grandiose, top left.
Top left. This is the one that Terry Rail just he hates it so bad, and it's so funny to read in the book the way he describes it. But this is the person who is high and mighty. They're indifferent, like it says. They're passive aggressive. They're never wrong. The person who lives here, the example he gives is of a woman who marries a man who just absolutely dotes on her and adores her, and he buys her all these gifts, but it's just never good enough. And she kind of has that attitude of, you're just really lucky that I'm your wife and that I haven't left you yet. And
once again, a small measure of that is good, but living that 24/7, not so much.
Lives there, sleeps in her bedroom, sleeps in her own bedroom, does whatever she wants, and her husband will never be good enough.
Yeah.
So another example, from a gospel perspective, of somebody who lives here is unrighteous dominion. Somebody who
we did a great episode on that with
Julie Hanks. A phenomenal.
Julie Hanks.
Somebody who maybe has a really high calling and also uses that as kind of a keep their family submissive underneath them, as I'm the one with the priesthood, I'm the one with the calling. What I say goes. We're not having this conversation, kind of keeping people under their thumb.
Yeah.
So that is someone who lives there.
Yeah.
So let's talk about someone who maybe has just stepped in there for a situation.
So I'm going to share one that's really controversial and might ruffle some feathers. So I think oftentimes when there's a change of faith inside of a marriage, I see this happen, where somebody maybe decides they don't want to practice Mormonism like they have in the past, or maybe they want to completely step away from the church. And typically one of the two partners
will put themselves
not typically, but often.
Yeah.
Often one of the two partners will put themselves in a position of grandiosity and walled off, which basically means I'm uninterested in hearing your opinion. I'm right. You're wrong. I'm better. You're worse. So on the one side, you might have somebody who decides to stay in the church and their partner decides to distance themselves from the church. And they think the church is true. I'm right. You're wrong. I'm not going to listen to your opinion. And if this is the path that you're choosing, we're getting a divorce. No discussion. I don't want to hear anything you have to say. Bye.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, I've seen the partner whose testimony changes and they decide they don't want to be part of the church say, I've learned these new things and I see the world differently now. And if you are unwilling to see the world that I see it, if you're unwilling to look at the evidence, whatever it might be, then then you're stupid and this is ridiculous. And I don't know if I can be married to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is one example of when there's a shift in faith where some people could drift into this quadrant and become very close-minded, very passive aggressive. I'm never wrong. I'm indifferent to your opinion. I don't care what you think, feel, or say. I'm not listening to you. This is too important to me, or I'm too right and you're too wrong, that I don't even want to hear it.
Right.
Another example that I have seen often is when people believe that certain things are someone's job. So somebody might be struggling or stressed out or sad, and they're willing to throw a tantrum or blame that person and be like, well, it's your job to make dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why are you asking me for help with this? It's your job to take care of the kids. It's your job to go to work. It's your job, whatever the roles are. When you kind of have this, I don't care. It's your job. That's what we signed up for when we got married.
And I want to reiterate that these are extreme examples of this,
but they're normal.
But they happen.
Yeah.
And that's what it looks like to be in this quadrant. And then I can share just a small example of what it looks like to step into this quadrant. Maybe not to live in this quadrant, but to step into it. And this just happened last night for us. But Nate was playing video games, and
Can we preface about why?
Yes. So Nate, okay, let's just say yesterday, both of us were in a funk. We were not having the greatest day. I was feeling exhausted and super huge and pregnant. Nate, I was overwhelmed, stressed with work, and also feeling, we went shopping for nursery stuff, and all day shopping for nursery stuff. It's like going through IKEA. You hear the situation all the time of two people going through IKEA, and if they come out on the other end still married, then it was a successful.
That was my day.
I
thought we were running to go pick up some things, and it ended up turning into like a marathon, looking at every little thing, and it was just like I just hit a limit, and I was done. And I've been working really hard to like take care of everything at home, so you haven't had to. So I just like was feeling a little. My tank was empty. I was at the end of my rope, and I'm like, I want to just take a couple hours and veg out and play some video games.
So that's something that happens every now and then is when Nate needs to veg, he'll just pull out his video games.
Just like Angilyn watches reality TV.
We all have our vices. But last night I was so annoyed with him playing his video games that I wanted him to stop.
You had the moral, you took the moral high ground.
And essentially I was like, we're going to spend time together, or you're going to turn this off and we're going to do something else. And he was like, can we have a conversation about this? Like, can we talk about this? And I was like, nope, I'm going to bed. I was like, if you're not willing to turn your game off right now
and do what I want to do,
I'm going to bed. And it was literally like, I shut my laptop, I threw it in the bag or whatever, and I stood up and I was like, I'm going to bed. And he's like, can we talk about this? And I was like, nope, I'm going to bed. And that was a situation where I had stepped into this grandiose walled off situation. I was unwilling to have the conversation. I was looking down at my nose on Nate because he was playing his stupid video games, and what a horrible waste of time, and had no desire whatsoever to even have a conversation about it.
Right.
So that's a typical example of being in that. Not proud of it. And after a good night's sleep, we had a really good conversation about it.
Yeah, we came down from the one-off position and we came away from the walled-off position.
Right. I realized that I had been completely closed-minded. I wasn't willing to see Nate's point of view. And I was looking down on him for his choices and his decisions. So in order to come back to a healthy center, I was able to come off my high horse a little bit and open my mind a little. Oh, I'm doing this opposite. Sorry, okay. The camera's opposite. Open my mind a little bit to Nate's point of view. And then we had a really good conversation and we were able to get past it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, let's talk about the bottom left quadrant. This is walled off and ashamed, like one down position. I'm a terrible person.
So this person is usually depressed. They're usually unmotivated, withdrawn, resistant to change.
Resistant to anything.
Right. A lot of times in a situation
that drags their feet to therapy
where you say, like,
partner brings it up.
Partner says, can we talk? And they just kind of avoid and stonewall. Or what's going on right now? What are you thinking? I don't know.
Nothing.
Just like the kind of person that you're trying to
fall into this quadrant,
to pull their teeth to get any information out of them, generally speaking. Yes. This is a person who is walled off and also very ashamed, unwilling to talk about it. And this person also typically falls into self-medicating.
For sure.
As an avoidant behavior.
Coping mechanism.
As an unhealthy coping mechanism. And self-medicating can look like alcohol and drugs, or it can be as simple as playing video games or
social media,
social scrolling on social media, and then just having that shame further
playing solitaire until
that's what I do
until your battery dies.
Spider solitaire. I love spider solitaire.
Another really common,
pornography.
Really common example. That's what I was just going to share. Is a husband who's struggling with porn. He hides it. He feels stupid and ashamed about it. It's oftentimes a coping mechanism for other discomforts that he's feeling in life, stresses, pressures. And he withdraws because he feels ashamed. Once again, the shame is like the one down. He puts himself beneath other people. He has that feeling, if people found out who I really was, they wouldn't love me. I'd be punished. Or I'm such a terrible person. It's not even worth the effort to even put energy into this. I'm just going to fail no matter what. All these judgments.
This person is in a deep, dark hole and they don't know how to get out of it.
Very unmotivated.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's really sad. It's really sad. And honestly, I really want to read what Terry Real talks about how to get back to center.
Go ahead.
I loved it. Let me just pull it up. I think this is beautiful. So he's talking about the person who is in this bottom left-hand corner. And getting out of this quadrant, I think, is probably one of the hardest quadrants to get out of. And this is what he says. He says, I believe that your decision to give up the safety of being on life's sidelines. So he is comparing this to just sitting on the sidelines of life. You're just kind of sitting out.
I'll try one day.
Right. To give up the safety of being on life's sidelines to instead throw yourself into the game will be no more and no less difficult before or after years of therapy. You have enough understanding right now. And if you're waiting for your feelings to change or for the risk to feel any less overwhelming, you may have a long wait on your hands. Get some good friends or a counselor behind you for support. Hold your nose and jump.
Yeah.
Trust that your boundary will be strong enough to protect you, and breathe yourself up from the dead weight of shame. Reach down and scoop yourself back up to same as. You're not a helpless victim. Try and fail, but try. Do it badly. Do it disastrously, but do it. Rejoice in small victories and build on them. One action at a time. Go. That gives me chills. I love that so much. It's just, if you want to get out of this space, you just have to jump in head first. You really do.
Yeah, he shares an example of somebody who goes to therapy for years to try and figure out why they're unwilling to jump in. And they're in it for years to the point where they finally understand, this is why I don't take risks, but they still haven't taken a risk.
Right.
They still haven't stepped up and taken action. Even though they might understand why they aren't taking action, they're not doing it. And so really, if you're in this quadrant, the best thing that you can do is just like remind yourself, I'm worthy. I'm okay. And the thing that's going to help me The thing that's going to help me truly believe that is by making my actions reflect the thoughts that I'm thinking.
And that's bringing yourself back up to the same as, like he was saying, and saying, I may be weak and I may have flaws and this may be hard for me, but I'm also strong and capable.
Yeah. This reminds me of Jordan Peterson talks a lot about this. If you've read the book, The 12 Rules for Life, one of the things Jordan Peterson talks about, he's a clinical psychologist who taught at University of Toronto for several decades. Brilliant guy. And one of the things that I really love that he talks about that is kind of a meme at this point online is clean your room. And he talks about how you can even find this online, people who are depressed and what their room looks like. And then when they start to feel better, one of the first steps that they do is they organize their space. And just walking into a clean and organized room that you've got rid of all the junk, everything's in its place, it feels organized, it feels orderly, it feels beautiful, you feel better. And that small act of taking action on something that you can control gives you a sense of hope. And then it's like, okay, if I can take care of my room, what else can I take care of? Can I take care of my whole house? Can I take care of my relationship with my wife? Can I take care of my relationship with my friends? Can I repair that? And as you start to clean your room in other aspects of your life, it helps dig you out of this hole that you're in. But sitting there and waiting for the circumstances to change without taking action isn't going to help you feel better. What helps you feel better is changing your actions and taking action even if you're feeling miserable.
Right.
And then you look at the results of that action, and even though it might be not, maybe your room isn't perfectly clean, but you made some progress. You folded up some laundry. You made your bed. Like something as simple as that can give you a little bit of momentum to keep moving forward.
Right. So this is I think this is a common one for us to step into, especially when it comes to wanting to start a new hobby or get into shape or go to bed earlier or get up earlier. We all find ourselves in this quadrant. All right, next one, upper right. There we go. Grandiosity and the boundaryless.
One up and boundaryless.
So emotionally volatile, reactive. In the relationship, they appear to be the scolding parent. Like, I'm Nate's wife. I'm not his mother. But if I'm if I'm in this quadrant, I'm starting to act like his mother. Or if he's in this quadrant, he's starting to act like my dad. Mother. Right. And also very controlling behavior. So this is when somebody feels like they're again in a one-up position. They disapprove of other people and then are very unfiltered in the way that they talk about how
speaking my truth,
right? How much they disapprove of somebody else. And also another side of it, the other side of the boundarylessness is they let the choices of what other people do affect them a lot. And yeah. So example of this, do you want to talk about yours? When you just kind of the dump truck. We've called it the dump truck in our relationship.
So I did this a couple months ago when Andrew was in her first trimester of pregnancy, and she was obviously exhausted. She was nauseous. She was tired. And I remember coming home one day from work and she had the day off, and I was like, I'm getting texts. Oh, well. So I came home from work, I walk in the door and she's laying on the couch playing a video game. And typically the agreement that we have is that when she's not working, she makes dinner. When she is working, I make dinner. So I come home expecting to have like dinner, maybe cooking or have her be prepping, and she's just laying on the couch, scrolling on her phone. And I got upset. And I got emotionally flooded and I took it personally. And I'm like, I'm carrying all the weight around here. I'm doing all the things. I'm stepping up. I'm like working really hard at my job. And I'm also working really hard around the house. And you can't even make dinner. And so I ended up like sitting down with her. And I shouldn't have done this, but I just did a dump. I had all these emotions going on in my brain and in my heart that were not positive toward Angilyn. And then just to let her know how I felt, I sat her down and I'm like, can we talk? And she's like, yes. And I'm like, honestly, I feel like our relationship's a little bit one-sided and I'm doing all the work and you don't really care and you're checked out and I don't know what's going on and you're changing and I feel like I'm alone and I'm feeling completely disconnected. And it's not personal, but you sure are being a little selfish lately. And I don't know what happened to my wife. And I just did not make her feel good. And I did not take control, and we eventually backtracked and I was able to apologize and we got to the root of it, which was like, hey, our relationship's changing. Angilyn's pregnant. It's going to change the dynamics and responsibilities. And we adjusted. But in that moment when I was feeling emotionally overwhelmed, I needed to be heard. And she wasn't allowed to she just had to sit there and let me back up the emotional dump truck and just dump all of my negative emotions on her so I could feel better. That is not about what a boundaried person does. That's like I'm exposing her to my very worst. There's not that orange containment.
Yes, containment is the boundary issue usually in this quadrant. You have a hard time containing your emotions.
The reason I was so upset was because I was in a one-up position. I was thinking about how I was better and doing more and carrying more weight and responsible for more, and how she was the slacker. She was the one who was being disappointing. She was the one who was not measuring up.
Right.
Yeah.
And someone who lives in this quadrant can be akin to somebody where whatever your partner does is just never good enough for you. And you're going to let them know. You're going to let them know that. And that's unfortunate. But again, with Nate's
What's
example, that was just him stepping in it. Another one, and this is going to be controversial.
It's true.
But it's very true. We talked about how the bottom left-hand corner with this walled off shame a lot of times is maybe a spouse or a husband who's struggling with pornography. And on the flip side, someone who often finds themselves in this grandiose boundaryless quadrant is often the spouse of somebody who is struggling with pornography. And whenever we bring this up, it puts a lot of people on the defense, and a lot of people do not enjoy hearing this, but it's very true, and it's very important to recognize when you're in this space. For this example, let's say a wife whose husband opens up to her that he's struggling with pornography, who then gets all the passwords to his accounts, who goes through his emails every day, goes through his texts every day, and is very controlling and of his behavior and emotionally volatile. They're in the position where they think they're better than their partner because at least they're not the one that's struggling with this, but they're also letting the actions of their partner affect them too much in the way that they have to control their behavior to feel good about themselves. And it's so important to recognize when you're in this space so that you can come back to the center of the grid. Because when you've got somebody who's in the bottom left-hand corner extreme and then the top right-hand corner extreme, it's going to be this cycle that never ends. It will never end. They will never come to a...
Just relax. A second.
Okay. What are we doing?
Well, that's just opposite, and that was just helping you.
Sorry. The camera's opposite.
Oh my gosh.
I can't do it. Anyways, the closer you both get to this healthy situation, the more the pornography is not going to be an issue anymore. And so it's so important as a spouse of someone who is struggling with pornography to recognize when you're in that space and to come down a little bit.
There's a reason that there feels like there's a complete lack of intimacy and connection when there's a relationship dynamic like that. And it's not just because the husband is struggling with porn. It's also because wife is in the extreme side of another quadrant that is also creating just as much of a lack of intimacy than husband's behavior oftentimes.
Right.
Not all the time, but many times.
And this isn't to say that they're responsible for the actions of their husband. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's important for them to take responsibility for their own actions and bring themselves back to the healthy center. Meaning to recognize that you're not above your husband with his choices. You're just as flawed and just as magnificent as him. And then to have some boundaries with the way that you verbalize those things.
Okay, let's get to the last quadrant.
Last quadrant.
Boundaryless and ashamed, or one down. So people in this quadrant are oftentimes anxious. They, what we call, horribilize things. They manipulate. They're desperate. I felt this way a lot when I was dating. Where you'd really like somebody and you text them, and if they didn't text back, I start to panic. I start to feel worried, like, oh my gosh, are they okay? Did they not like me anymore? Are we going to break up? And it just cycles out of control. And it's like, oh my gosh, my life is over.
This is when someone doesn't feel good about themselves. Obviously, they always feel like they're not good enough for somebody else, and then constantly allow the emotions of others to affect them. Yeah. If someone's really happy, they're happy. If someone's really sad, they're happy. They're sad. If someone's really anxious, they're anxious. They just don't have any ability to regulate their own emotions.
Protect
their own emotions. They're very highly influenced by the emotions of everyone around them.
People in this who spend a lot of time in this quadrant get really good at manipulating others because they oftentimes derive their self-worth from other people's approval. They get really good at manipulating other people into coming in and saving them or spending time with them or taking care of them, giving them attention. And you find, like, a really great example is people who say, like, if you leave me, I'll take my own life or I'll hurt myself. that is somebody who's going to be in the bottom right quadrant. They have lower self-esteem and they don't have boundaries. So they're not sure they don't know how to contain the negative aspects of themselves, and they don't know how to protect the negative.
So they've determined their self-worth based on the fact that
Right.
they're with this person, and if this person leaves them, then it's a disaster.
Somebody who gets worked into a hissy if they say, hey, call me when you get there, and you forget to call, and then they're like, oh my gosh, I thought you died. Oh, and they follow that path to horribilizing. People who can't like self-soothe and calm their own anxieties. They need to bring other people in, manipulate other people in to solve their own anxieties. That is somebody who's going to be down in this quadrant.
Right. And I find myself stepping into this quadrant sometimes, frequently stepping into this quadrant.
This is like your go-to.
So horribilize is the word that Nate dubbed for what I do in this situation where, let's say I'm talking with I'm texting a coworker, and I send them a text, and then I get a one-word answer back. And now all of a sudden,
is she mad
for
at
the
me?
rest of the night, I'm thinking, oh, is that the wrong thing to say? Oh, if I don't hear back from them, then something's wrong, and I have to know what they think of me. They must be thinking I'm some stupid, horrible person. Yeah, that's stepping into this quadrant. So how you get out of this is protecting your emotions a little bit.
Learning to breathe,
learning
to self-soothe, learning to manage the thoughts that you tell yourself, the narrative that you tell yourself.
Being able to protect what comes in your boundary. Being able to say, okay, does this feel true? If it feels true, let it in. If it doesn't feel true, keep it out. And
without a massive emotional reaction.
Yes. This is when Nate's having a stressful, anxious day, I don't get stressful and anxious as well. I let him have his space, and I don't let his emotions permeate my own. And then again, bringing yourself up from that shame of thinking that you're less than.
Yep. So the big question I have for you is, which quadrant do you spend the most time in? Or which quadrant is your go-to? Where are you at right now? And if you learn something from learning about these quadrants, what are the action steps that you're going to do to take yourself more towards health and intimacy? Like, you should always be able to sit down and take a look at this quadrant and get a barometer or some sort of gauge as to how you're doing on the spectrum of relationship health. Do I fall more in the shame side of the scale or the grandiose side of the scale? You know, I think I used to fall more on the shame side, but now I lean more towards grandiose. That's just part of who I am. And then
pendulum.
Do I tend to wall myself off more and cut off contact with my partner, or do I tend to be more boundaryless? There's going to be a balance between the two. It's good to protect yourself, but it's also important to contain yourself. And if you're completely uncontained or completely unprotected, you have no intimacy. If you're one up, there's no intimacy. If you're one down, there's no intimacy. The only way you get intimacy and connection is by being same as and by being protected and contained at the same time. That is the gateway to intimacy. That is the thing that very few couples ever really get to experience for prolonged periods of time, unless they're conscious of it and really working on it.
This takes a lot of self-reflection and a lot of learning from hindsight.
Morgan says, I feel like I've been in multiple quadrants at the same time. Yeah, you're not alone there. Like, or you just bounce around in them in one conversation. You go from like super high to super low and super guarded to like exploding. That oftentimes happens with people who stonewall. They'll shut somebody off and they're like, no. And the pressure builds and the pressure builds and the pressure builds. And like Angilyn said, the contempt on the walled off and boundaryless side of things, like, it's contempt for self. That's why people who oftentimes stonewall, what they're trying to do is protect other people from the emotional outburst that they know is on the other side of the wall.
Right.
And so what happens is the pressure builds and the pressure builds. And if somebody's persistent enough on that wall and they knock it down, what they get is a boundaryless person. And you go whoosh right to the other side of the quadrant.
That's why when people say, like, let's say they're having a hard time getting their spouse to open up, you don't want to just knock down their walls. That's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
If we get a lot of questions at some time, well, what if my husband doesn't want to talk about this? What if I keep having these conversations with my wife and she just keeps shutting me down? Knocking down those walls and those barriers is not going to get you the result that you need.
You want to read this quote? Did we already read it?
Yeah, we already read this.
Yeah.
quote.
Respect the walls.
Respect
They're
the
there for a
walls.
reason.
And it's not about knocking them down. It's about allowing them to move more towards the center and encouraging them to move more towards the center so that you can have easier conversations.
Amanda says, I'm in the bottom right more often, but still visit all the other quadrants. Great. So if you're in the bottom right, how do you start telling yourself more stories about self-worth? I'm worthy. I've been paid for with an infinite price, and start setting some boundaries so you can protect other people from your boundary.
One way of doing this is learning to say no to people and not worrying about what they think about you.
Here's a great exercise for you. Sit in front of your partner face to face and set a timer for like 2 or 3 minutes, and tell your partner they can ask for anything that they want, physical, emotional, mental, and for that like 3 to 5 minute period. And you have the right to say yes or no to any of those things, and just practice saying no, even if you could give them what they wanted. Just set a timer and practice saying no.
And they've even said, just tell them that. Just say, I'm going to say no to everything that you ask me to do. But just practicing that ability to verbalize no and not worry about what someone thinks is important.
Yeah, I think it's easy to be boundaryless in our society, since I feel like we're taught that boundaries are bad because you're not being kind. That's a great comment, Suzette. Mm-hmm. And I think you're right. I think especially in Mormon culture, it's uncouth to say no to like a leader or to a calling or to an assignment. People kind of get shocked and taken aback that you would say no, and it bothers them. I know I've even been bothered by it when I've asked people to do things and they're like, no. And ultimately it's okay. Like, it's important to say no sometimes to protect yourself.
And again, it's that healthy balance of having the boundaries that protect you, but also letting enough of yourself out that you're not just like saying no to every single thing. There's that balance there.
Yeah. So I really loved studying this relationship grid that brings you to intimacy and closeness this week. And I hope that this lesson has given you a really cool concept of or a really cool idea of where boundaries and self-esteem intersect. And that is how emotional intimacy, that is how connection is created. If you're feeling disconnected from your partner, look at the grid and figure out, okay, where am I and where's my partner? And if we move towards the center, I guarantee you what happens is you get more intimacy and more connection.
Right.
Cool concept.
Super cool concept.
Yeah.
And the more you find yourself in this quadrant, the more you will attract people who are also in the center, or encourage those around you to get to the center as well.
Very true. Very true.
Does anyone have any questions about this?
That's a full hour.
That was a full hour. That was a lot of stuff to cover.
I hope it was worthwhile.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed that, guys. We had less people on today than we normally do, so I hope everybody's okay.
I think people are starting to go back to church.
Yeah.
And so it's harder for people to just pop right on.
I really liked home church with you.
It's been great.
Yeah.
Our ward's not going back anytime soon, so.
And neither are we, because we have a baby coming.
That's true. We don't want to.
We'll see you in 2021.
We don't want to risk anything. But.
So we'll hang around for another couple minutes and answer any questions that you guys might have.
The lesson itself is over, but we'll hang out.
This is what we wanted to teach you today.
Once again,
my hope.
New rules for marriage. Terry Real. Get it. It's really good. Your hope is what?
Oh, just my hope is that this clarified something, that somebody had a light bulb moment and they go, oh, that's why we're struggling with this, or that's why I'm feeling disconnected from my partner. That's why we haven't, I don't know, we've been feeling a little off lately. Mm-hmm. It's because I've been slipping into walled off and ashamed, or,
Right. And if anyone wants these.
Amanda, you're welcome.
Of course.
Thanks for tuning in.
If anyone wants this stuff, just send us a message and we can send you the PDF that we made with this quadrant on it. Or you can just snap a screenshot of it. That works too.
Okay, let's hang around for another minute or two, and then I'm starving Marvin. I'm ready for some luncho.
All right. I'm cool with that.
What's lunch in Spanish?
Almuerzo.
Luncho.
I thought you said what's lunch in Spanish.
Oh.
I said almuerzo.
So that's lunch in Spanish.
That is not.
Remember that time I was trying to help you adjust your arms and you were froze up?
I didn't know what you were doing. I was confused.
We should go play with the puppy.
Melissa has a comment.
What did she say?
She missed the first half due to an unexpected knock on the door, but eager to listen to the rest of it.
Oh, Melissa, thanks.
Yeah. We hope you get a lot
I
out
hope
of
it was a friendly knock on the door, not a salesperson. Somebody who loves you.
Yes. You're welcome.
You're welcome as always. Come back anytime. And if you guys want us to cover anything in particular, we'd love to hear about it. We'd love to talk about it. I think one of the things that we'll talk about soon is how to get over an ex. I know we had a request from one of our YSA listeners of, when you go through a rough breakup, what do you do? Angilyn and I both were engaged to other people before we met each other. And we get what it's like to lose.
Be on both sides of being broken up with and doing the one breaking up with people.
Did you call it off or did you?
I was the one that called off mine.
Me too. But it felt like the opposite was true. Anyway.
Okay. Well, we love you guys. Thanks
Have
for
a wonderful week.
tuning in.
Share this with anybody you think might really benefit from it. And
Yeah.
we'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.
Oh.